new book, Bodies,
Yeah.
is pretty much taking off from what you wrote about 30 years ago.
Well, it is and it isn't, right? Because I wanted to look at bodies today and bodies in our time and the place of bodies. Where I think Fifi, Fat is a Feminist Issue, was directed at women's eating problems, this is a much broader discussion about embodiment and disembodiment, about what's going on in second life and what the pharmaceutical or the cosmetic surgery industries are doing with bodies, what's our engagement in transforming our bodies. So I think it's got a much wider scope.
Is there not a risk when talking about society's expectations of how you look and how that affects us, that it risks reducing eating disorders to just wanting to be about looking like a model? I mean, there is a difference between the messages we get fed by magazines and actual eating disorders, which are mental illnesses.
I think there's a complex link, okay, because you can't say all of a sudden you've got a generation of people with severe eating disorders, which you do now have, without it having something to do with changes in the social structure and the role of the media and the role of visual imagery and the kinds of disturbed, distressed situations that are foisted on mums, which then affects how they relate to their daughters, especially bodies. What were considered serious eating disorders 30, 20 years ago are now not considered serious eating disorders.
They're the norm for how women behave.
More the norm.
I mean, that's one of the things that I find quite frustrating working in the media and reading a lot of media and magazines and newspapers, is what they often term as anorexia or an eating disorder is not.
The problem is, how do we deal with the really extreme end of where it's not volitional at all, where you are completely caught up in something.
And it's, you're risking dying, as well as becoming permanently infertile or having osteoporosis or whatever.
Exactly. And the low grade or medium grade
that you live with forever.
Distressed eating that has become a women's mantra. Having an anxiety. Now, I mean, I don't think that's particularly good for mental health either.
No, and there's no reason to live with that unhappiness either.
But so I think I don't want to mush the two together, but I don't want to say they're unrelated.
The way the media affects women with eating disorders is not the sense that it causes it, but it condones it once you're in it. And it's a more immediate option if you're looking for a way of punishing yourself. And it's often harder to get out of because, like you say, it's seen as the norm.
I mean, I think there's even a sense in the media of a sort of a little badge of honour and a little bit of,
absolutely.
Why don't you catch a bit of anorexia?
Yeah. Speaking as someone who's written about fashion for a long time now, when you point out that it is an aesthetic issue, the problem really ultimately comes down with magazine editors, because the designers need their products featured in magazines. Magazine editors, mentioning no names, but particularly those in America, still fetishize skinny models. And when you compare the models in, say, American fashion magazines, American ones are much thinner.
Right. I mean, they may not be thinner, but they're made thinner, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they're digitally. But I think the thing that maybe we could think about is that when Rankin did Dazed, that version with paraplegics, he styled it. And he styled it in a way that would have captivated any fashion editor's eye. So it isn't beyond the capacity of an editor to style fashion in different sizes. They just haven't put their mind to it because they're inside that aesthetic. If what they do is take a large woman, that doesn't do it. That is completely the opposite of really what I'm talking about in terms of diversity and variety and embrace and really democratizing beauty.
What is it, though, do you think, that makes people, particularly in the West, I suppose, if we're just going to be focusing rather than talking generally, so attracted to extremes, whether it's not eating loads, having super skinny models, or having Beth Ditto on the cover? I mean, it just seems to be there's never any middle. Is that just because it's common and therefore it's boring?
I don't think that we're into extremes. I think we are inside of an aesthetic too, so then we can be inside the opposite of that aesthetic rather than broadening it. And I think if we look to the artists, we'd see far more interesting things.
Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.